All right, so stepping into week 3, you've now had 2 weeks to really absorb the workload. Your day in and day out, the different run, right? The hill sprints, the 400s, the long run, you've now done a ruck, you felt that load. You've also felt the continuous or consistency in load throughout your body, doing probably a bunch of new body weight movements and then some probably OG original body weight movements that you've done a lot of before. But you're starting to feel that volume build up. You're starting to see that progression go. But again, you know the basic rules. So let's dive into, we talked about breath extensively last week. This week, we're gonna talk about stress. We're gonna talk about force. And so essentially this is how the body adapts. Like this is, the reason why I wanted to do week 2 breath is because I think breath is so crucial, a part of our physiology, something to be very, very aware of, because it also is a part of our psychology, can really help both and, right? Where stress is the same, but oftentimes when we hear the word stress, we think about a gnarly job that's really difficult, a bad boss, people that rub us wrong, being overwhelmed with a bunch of tasks and feeling not really a way out or something like that. But stress comes in physiological forms as well. As a matter of fact, oftentimes it is our physiological stress of lack of nutrition, lack of glucose running through our veins, so biochemically not set up for the ability to handle certain actions and certain tasks, not only mentally because we're running through carbs, right, in our brain, or glucose in our brain. We maybe haven't figured out ways to roll body fat into a usable source for our blood, or we aren't very efficient at that system. We aren't very efficient at that biochemical process. So we just don't have access to it when we're either on a fast or an incidental fast because we forgot to eat or something like that. So then we get hangry, right? We tend to make worse choices for ourselves, choices that end up blowing up in our face psychologically, right? When we have less nutrition, when we've been awake for too long, when we haven't had a chance to come down, when we've done something very strenuous. So stress comes in all shapes and forms. It's not just psychological. Oftentimes it's more physiological, and then that's hurting our psychological form of stress. So when we talk stress, right, this is when it's high stress, this is when it's putting our body into that sympathetic freeze, flight, or flight, or fight, right? So freeze is usually the first thing that we do, and in the Marine Corps we call it going black, right? You're not thinking about anything else, right? You're not processing anything else. You just freeze, and then you become a standing target, right? A pretty easy thing to pick off if you're looking at it from the enemy's perspective, right? Flight is the next thing that usually will happen. So sometimes we'll get freaked out, some scared, something comes out, jumps at you, barks at you, something like that. Boom, you freeze for a second, and then immediately you run. And you don't even really think about running, your body's already running away. And then the next thing is like, okay, maybe you don't have anywhere to go, but you're not gonna die frozen like a statue, like an idiot, standing there with your dick in your hand, so to speak, right? You're gonna put your foot down and you're gonna fight, right? And oftentimes we end up in that fight situation because we still have some resolve left, but there's nowhere to go, right? So we think about the caged animal or the cornered animal or something like that. Same thing. Or maybe we've conditioned that fight response or whatnot. So think about that with the sympathetic. But that freeze, that flight and fight, that sympathetic nervous system can be turned on. That high stress can be turned on from just anxiety about a shitty job, right? Or some bad life choices. It can arrive stepping up to a really heavy deadlift, or having to do that body weight workout one more time, right? Fuck, it's Wednesday and I just did it on Monday. Like, oh, this is gonna be brutal, right? I'm not looking forward to this. I'm super sore, I'm really tired, I'm not moving very well. I don't mind doing the mobility, but as soon as we get into that movement prep, I don't know if I can do it. And so we're gonna probably feel like the need to freeze, not do anything, be lazy, stop. Flight, nah, I'm gonna let this one pass me by, right? Or fight. And sometimes we fight by making unhealthy choices and doing stupid stuff that's not gonna serve us really well. I'm gonna try to find the bottom of Instagram just one more time. I'm gonna just scroll to see if I can find the bottom. Or I'm gonna do these emails because I feel really productive doing these emails. Instead of having the crucial conversation or that conversation with your body, like, hey, I need to get some work in. But we know when we've started to inoculate ourselves to these micro doses of stress, if you will, these workouts, right? Then we build capacity, right? And we build capacity through force. So when I talk about stress, even from an emotional standpoint, it is force, or maybe working it the opposite way. Any force that we incur through our body physiologically is a stress, right? But stress doesn't have to be a bad thing. It doesn't have to send us, boom, through the roof into our sympathetic nervous system, right? That freeze, that flight, or that fight mode, right? It doesn't have to put us there. We can inoculate ourselves to that, right? And we can do that through breath. So that's why I taught breath first. So now you've got diaphragmatic breathing on your side, you've got box breathing on your side, you now understand anatomical breathing and paradoxical breathing. So now you're given those so that when you're going into your workout, okay, I'm gonna do some box breathing, set myself up for success, and then get after it. Or I'm just gonna focus on my breath for a couple of moments. I'm gonna pause, and then I'm gonna get into this workout. Because I know this workout is creating micro doses of stress that will inoculate my body, giving it more capacity. So why am I talking about capacity? Well, we know force is the language of all cells, right? So if I wanna create an adaptation, if I want to get something stronger, if I want to build resilience in a tendon, if I want to build a stronger bone, right, in my femur or in my tib or my fib or something like that, then I know I need to load force, directional force through that part of my body. And the more I put that force over the amount or just barely over the amount that body can handle, then it's going to respond by adapting. Right? It's gonna send more osseous tissue. It's gonna lay down more tissue, osseous tissue, bone, right? It's gonna lay down more muscle. It's gonna lay down more tendon. It's gonna lay down more soft tissue, more fascia, whatever it needs to do to help build me up so I can now handle more load through that part of my body or through that particular movement pattern, right? And that, my friends, is capacity. So we also build capacity in our joints. So if I want to open up my mobility of my shoulder joint, let's say, then I need to build more capacity, whether it's in the capsule itself, whether it's in the tendons, the tissues, right? Nervously, it allows it to get into further ranges while still being able to hold control and hold strength. Then that means I have a more mobile shoulder, I have a more stable shoulder, which also means I have a stronger shoulder, a more powerful shoulder, and a shoulder that has more efficiency, more effectiveness, and more endurance, right? And who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want more capacity? And not just in our shoulder, but in our entire body, right? And not just in our entire body, but also in our mind. If I've got more capacity in my mind, emotionally, right? Handling tasks, not being overwhelmed, handling physical work, right? If I have more capacity in my body, then it's gonna take a lot more to injure me. It's gonna take a lot more to stop me. It's gonna take a lot more to keep me down, right? If I wanna move forward faster, if I wanna move forward better, if I wanna be a better version of myself, then I'm gonna need to build capacity. And a great way to build capacity physiologically is through inoculating yourself through microdoses in workout. And specific workouts programmed with a progression in mind, right? So that we're building specific capacity. And so we're building capacity in mobility, we're building capacity in movement patterning, we're building capacity in movement variability, we're building capacity in power, we're building capacity in strength, we're building capacity in endurance, right? And all of those things, that gives me much, much, much more capacity, not only physiologically, but because naturally and intrinsically, my body and my mind are connected. When I build capacity physiologically, that also gives me capacity psychologically, right? And who doesn't want that? So capacity versus demand. When demand is higher than the capacity that you can handle, whether it's on a single tendon or an entire system, right? That's when injury occurs. That's when the sympathetic drives turns into a nervous breakdown, turns into depression, turns into anxiety, right? Turns into things that we don't have as much control over, right? So we want to build capacity now while we do have control over it. So this understanding here are some of the best tools that you'll have in your tool belt. So knowing that you can self-inoculate stress, you can self-inoculate force, right, to create capacity so that you can handle higher demands, right? Who doesn't want that? And we do it through tissue, and we do it through our biochemical process. But more importantly, and I wrote it small over here, we do it through recovery as well. So this is often the most overlooked. So it tends to be kind of behind somebody while they're talking about the more important things that we think, like the workout, the 60 minutes that you're gonna spend here doing all this work, and physiological and adaptation and specific adaptation to impose demands, blah, 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 right? But then we forget about this little guy, which isn't such a little guy. Right? This is our sleep, right? Taking control back in our sleep, giving ourselves more sleep. More sleep is usually what is going on, what we need. Very few times, at least in America, right? Or in Canada, or in the Western world, if you will, right? Very few times it's, oh, I sleep too much, right? Most of the time we don't sleep enough, right? And so that will catch up to us. Physiologically, psychologically, that will catch up to us. Getting ourselves into that parasympathetic nervous system, right? Getting ourselves into recovery, right? That's important. Nutrition is part of recovery. Hydration is part of recovery, right? So we don't have this huge nutrition program, this huge hydration program. There's a ton of great information out there. I would just state in moderation, right? And then make sure that you're consuming enough calories that you're gonna be burning through this program, and maybe a little bit more because of your basic metabolic needs. There's a ton of free apps that are out there that will help you with all of these things, right? But this knowledge, right, tends to get passed by, tends to not be found. You have to search high and low. You have to really get out there and know what you're looking for in order to get this information. So, recovery, right? Recovery, recovery, recovery. So, and remember, that starts with your diaphragmatic breathing. You post-workout, you do your mobility, which is part of your recovery, then you do your diaphragmatic breathing, right? It also happens within the workout with the box breathing. So we talked about that last week. And then we can do diaphragmatic breathing outside. We can do meditation, contemplation, and those things are gonna be talked at as well. You're gonna be doing journaling and other things that are gonna also help you get into that parasympathetic state and bring everything down. We don't always have to be like me and go, and intense, and then talk like Steve-O, right? We can calm it down. We can bring the volume down. We can bring the intensity down. There should be large bouts of that in your life, specifically for your physiological improvement, for improving your hormone structure, right? And so, even though I wrote it small to make a point. We tend to think it's not important. This should be written throughout this entire thing, right? Recovery, get yourself into that parasympathetic state. And do it for the tissues, do it for the biochemistry, right? So thinking about this, the way that we talk to our body and tell it to adapt, right, is just what we normally do. So if you sit on the couch, if you sit on the car, in your car, if you sit on the computer, right, and if you sit on your cell phone all day long, what are you telling your body to adapt to? What are you telling your physiology? Hey, this is what I want you to do, right? By every single action that you take, you're telling it to do something, right? Same with your psychology. You're telling it to do something, right? So if I'm couch, computer, car, and cell phone all of the time, I'm telling it to be in this kyphotic, rounded, seated, death-leaning state. Think about this. Car, couch, right? Car is here, right? Computer, cell phone. This, my friends, is where we go to die. This is where we go to thrive, right? So this is where we want to be. This is where we want to be. We want to teach our tissues life thriving. We want to teach our biochemistry life thriving. We're going to have better lymphatic flow and better posture. We're going to have better blood flow with better posture. We're going to have better hormone structure with better posture. We're going to have more confidence. We're going to have a psychological edge with better posture, right? So it's all in how we talk to our body. So when we're doing our mobility, we're talking to that glenohumeral joint. We're talking to that elbow joint. We're talking to that wrist joint. And we're telling it, hey, I would like a little bit more capacity here, please. If I can have more capacity here, more capacity here, more capacity here. And then when I do my work, push, pull, rotation, all the stuff that I do with that arm, I'm asking these muscles for a little bit more capacity. I'm asking these bones for a little bit more capacity, right? And think about it. We're having a conversation with our body when we're working out. It's like marriage counseling, right? Our psychology is talking to our physiology. And so if our psychology is telling our physiology shitty stuff, we're gonna get shitty results. And the same thing works the other way. If our physiology is telling our psychology shitty stuff, we're gonna get shitty results. We're not gonna think good thoughts. We're gonna think automatic negative thoughts, not automatic positive thoughts. There's gonna be a whole cycle, a whole snowball effect of negativity or of not good, right? So think about what your dialogue is with your tissue. Think about what your dialogue is with your biochemistry, right? This is how we're gonna create more capacity. This is how we're gonna be able to handle more force and handle more stress.